All right. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to SMPTE Presents, our first new episode in the series, Ask an Industry Innovator. I'm sure most of you are used to Zoom by now, but before we get started, I want to go through a few housekeeping tips. We've got at the bottom of your Zoom window, you've got the Q&A button. This is where you'll ask your questions. My co-pilot, Brian Gaffney, who you see down there maybe, will be fielding your questions, so please feel free to participate. We'll be stopping now and then, so there should be plenty of time to answer your questions. On to the show. So I'd like to introduce Rob Hendrick, Director of Post-Production and Supervising Producer for the NHRA Championship Drag Racing. Rob is an award-winning post-production supervisor and special projects producer for national telecasts across multiple platforms. He's produced and edited special segments, image campaigns, and commercial spots, and built a broadcast studio and editing facility to create daily content for broadcast and for digital. In addition, he's special projects producer for features and show opens and supervises operations for studio productions and show deliverables to networks. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, thanks for having me, Greg.
Cool, so glad you could join us. So we've all been looking at work for home. How do we keep everything moving without stopping business continuity? And you have a very special story to tell, and so glad you could be with us today. You had some challenges. Some of them are the common challenges we have, but I think you've had some special ones. You had to produce content remotely with very limited access to the office. But unlike many of us, you actually saw this coming in advance. Can you tell us a little bit about how you saw this and what you did to prepare for this?
Yeah, I saw when San Francisco started talking about the idea of moving everything to lockdown and work from home, et cetera. About a week before it happened, my leadership group came to me and asked, like, hey, what's going to happen if we need to start working remotely? Will we be able to do that? And because of some decisions made before the pandemic to put us into the Sony C work environment and Bebop, most of my editors were already working in a cloud environment. So it was very simple to be able to give them either a machine to take home or a zero client so they could do all their work remotely. And the transition was pretty smooth.
Yeah, that's really cool. And now at this point, the races had stopped, right? So you had to create original programming waiting for the live events to resume.
Right. Part of that move to get everybody work from home before the lockdown happened in LA County, about a week out, I went to the office and grabbed the screw gun and essentially stripped our studio and brought all the gear home, brought home our TriCaster, a bunch of our new tech equipment, a mixer, essentially moved the studio home except for the cameras.
Yeah, who gets to do that, right? Who gets to walk into a machine room with a screwdriver and do that? Normally they might be mad or stick the police at you, but you made it all happen and actually it worked out for you.
I figured like that's one of those, going initially thought, oh, we'll be doing this for a couple weeks, maybe a month at the time. And I said, I'll just ask for forgiveness later, but I did it. And when we turned around our first show a week later, my boss texted me and he literally just said, oh, that's cool. So I was like, okay, I guess that's okay then.
Yes, because you solved the problem and the show must go on, right?
Right, exactly. And so one of the things we had to do was figure out how do we engage fans, how do we engage drivers, and how do we connect them to the, our fans are eccentric about our sport. So we wanted to make sure they could still feel connected. So our main announcer and my boss had the idea of like this mystery science theater of taking an old race and having the racers participate in the show and our announcer. So here, I'll share my screen and I can show you a little bit of that show.
Oh, that's awesome. This is NHRA Rewind?
This is NHRA Rewind. So we brought in all the racers here. You can see all of them are joining us on Skype. So the beauty of NewTek's talk show box is you can have up to 4 Skype participants, and then it lets you create a separate mix minus for each person there. So everybody hears everybody else except themselves. And then through on the air video, I was able to send playback to them as well. So the main big window there with the door handle is the actual show that aired last year. And then through NewTek's NDI tools, I'm doing their scan converter and just grabbing a little portion of Facebook off of our live Facebook page. So people watching there can comment and you can see it in real time. So I'll play a little of this so you can see.
Live. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just impressed with this technology.
We'll find out how impressed we all are by the time we're done tonight. We have Andrew Hines, defending world champion with total flex tonight with the white hat on. Look at this guy. What we're going to do, we're going to watch the race with our three racers. We're going to talk about it, give you some of the inside stories from that weekend, and kind of go through eliminations. We have shortened up the race day show to give you a nice tight program, and this is interactive. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you head over on the Facebook page, participate live in the comments section, and you can ask these racers questions, which we'll interpret and send into the broadcast over the course of the evening.
So then we watched the show. We took the 3-hour show and shortened it down to about an hour, and the engagement was really good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, like you mentioned, you have a lot of loyal fans. A lot of people really tune in for the races, but also turn in for the color, right? They want to hear what people are like behind the scenes. So
that's
now
where it was cool, like the interactability that we're finding through YouTube, and I mean people watching now on YouTube and the Facebook page, the ability to like interact with the person. I mean, where else can you actually talk to the guy that's the primary analyst for the show during the show?
Right. And that's a good point. And thanks for that reminder. This is actually the first time SMPTE is on our webinar platform on Zoom. We're also restreaming on YouTube, basically to our Hollywood and SMPTE National website. So that's really fantastic that we're able to reach the crowd that we can reach. And you're an engineer. There's a lot to make this happen. Clearly, you have in your arsenal a huge amount of Swiss Army knives to get done what you need to get done. I'm a workflow guy. You're a workflow guy. Do you have anything? Can you show us a slide that shows your workflow?
Yeah, I always joke and say that I make great graphics in VizRT and Photoshop, but then when it comes to PowerPoint, I'm a little challenged there. So give me just a second to share that.
Yeah, no problem.
So here's kind of the workflow. This is 10,000 foot view. The Glendora office is where all the gear that's connecting me back from my home office. And I'm using a combination. Everything goes through the public internet until it gets back to the office. And all these, we always say good engineering is the small decisions. Our technology executive, Mike Rakosa, had the idea. I initially wanted to put all of our encoders and decoders in the TV truck for production. And he had the great idea to put everything at the office where it connects to AT&T's global video services, which is like the switch or level 3. And that way, not only do I have connectivity to the TV truck, but then in off days, I can actually utilize AT&T from home and be able to send my signal and get a signal from anyone who has AT&T global video services. Kiloview is who I selected for the encoders and decoders. They have a really great product and it's very cost effective. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this until it was absolutely working. And when we found Kiloview, it was a great product and it did everything we need. Their tech support has been through the roof supportive. I mean, they set me up with their lead engineer on Skype. And so at 3 in the morning, I was able to chat with them and get everything running. One of the big things too that I found was a problem was how to monitor the input and output of the circuit remotely. So I bought one of those cheap little HDMI to USB converters that you see on Amazon for $30 and put a Blackmagic multiviewer at the office. And then the Blackmagic multiviewer joins a Zoom call during telecasts so that on my laptop, I can just see what it's doing remotely.
That's awesome. And the more I hear about how you've done this, it's amazing that clearly you're an engineer. If you're someone that works at a very, very big company, you go with big solutions that are usually pretty expensive. Obviously, we're moving from hardware to software. But what you've done is you had a problem and you found a solution. And in every case that I've seen so far, it's been very cost effective, or one of those like head slaps, like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? That maybe it wasn't intended for that purpose, but you made it workable in that situation.
Well, and that's one of the things that we're finding in the pandemic. I'm sure everybody's suffering through this, is figuring out, like, what do I have on my shelf right now that will let me work in a completely different workflow than we've set up for the past 20 years? And how do I make it to where the end viewer may notice a little bit of a difference, but it's still a quality product that they can enjoy? And, everybody's so starved for fresh content. So anything new, even if it looks a little wonky, is still going to be consumed pretty heavily. Just to show too, like the real life photo of this is the actual setup here. This is where I'm sitting right now. So it's a pretty intense setup in my spare bedroom, but it's nice to be able to come to work and be 2 feet from my own house and feel safe in here. So it feels like a pretty good space.
Yeah, and I'm sure the drapes don't look that good at your office at the actual studio. Now, looking at that, I mean, man, we would say, people like Brian and I were like, man, that must have cost $1 million years ago, and it probably did. It's amazing. Obviously, a lot of what we see, the glitzy lights, those are control surfaces, and all the expensive stuff's happening in software now at a much lower price. That's pretty amazing. We'll actually show some other shots of you in your studio, your home studio soon. There's one question we already have from the audience. The question is, was the consumer viewer feedback better with this approach that you're doing now?
It was, I don't know that it was better, but it was definitely appreciated. We got a lot of notes from people saying, hey, you guys are really killing it. Thank you so much for keeping us engaged. I mean, we're using Monday for our workflow management. And when we went to the lockdown, I think March 16th, between March 16th and now, we've created 300 pieces of original content. And everyone that sends us a note in says, thanks for the new stuff. Wow, that was cool. This is really neat. We can't wait to see this. We do a show on Wednesdays called Shop Talk, where it's the primary announcer for the TV show and the primary announcer in the venue. And they get on and they just talk shop. And the engagement there has been huge. So people they're loving being able to interact. And they talk about our sport's a real nerd tech sport. So they get down and dirty and they talk engine parts and lifter rods and everything. And people just eat it up.
Yeah. And so in that case, the pandemic really kind of helped incubate a lot of these new ways to provide entertainment for your fans.
Right. And it's I don't want to say it's great that it happened, but it's nice that we've been able to engage in a different way. And, you can almost throw something against the wall and see what sticks. And it's great because people are really receptive to anything that's fresh and new. Right.
Okay. Well, moving on to our second section, how you are producing content remotely. Can you talk about the Fox Sports 1 Open and how you accomplish that? We'd love to see visuals.
Yeah, for sure. So part of my responsibility as post-production supervisors, I also get to edit. And when we do shows, Fox has been really big to us during this, and they've given us a lot of network time. So most of our telecasts air on Fox Sports, but Fox has been a really good partner during this, and they've given us a lot of airtime on their national network. So we did 9 hours of coverage from Indianapolis a couple weekends ago, and our show producer asked me if I would cut our Fox Sports Open to start off the broadcast day on Sunday. So I'll share my screen again and I'll show you a little bit of that. One of the things I really like about our sport is the founder of our sport was really media savvy, even back in the 50s. And he went and had newsreel companies cover the sport. So we have stuff back almost till 1955. He had newsreels from that time. So it's great when you do these big moments to be able to go back and pull from that. So here, I'll roll a little of this.
During the pandemic, Indianapolis has played host to NHRA Championship drag racing, 3 milestone events that have added to the sport's storied past.
From Indianapolis, Indiana, it's the National Drag Racing Championship.
The irony of these fabled grounds becoming the temporary home for the NHRA is the fact that its permanent spot in history runs to the bedrock of professional drag racing as the home of the NHRA U.S. Nationals for 60 years.
Big Daddy takes an easy win.
After 3 events designed to launch the sport's return to racing, the historic annual event is all about the greatest drag racers in the world and their ability to strive.
I'm going to have to hold back tears right now because this is a dream come true for me for a very long time.
History remembers the winners of this vaunted race, and in 2020, the Denso Sparkplugs U.S. Nationals keeps with tradition, thundering on Labor Day weekend with fans in attendance. Those fans will get a first-hand look as we welcome back the most decorated U.S. Nationals winner in NHRA history, Tony Schumacher, as he returns for the remainder of the 2020 season. And perhaps we'll witness an elusive first U.S. Nationals win for Funny Cars star Ron Capps. It's the big go. Next.
And then that's where they cut back to live and then do the rest of the intro live on site.
Right. Yeah, no pressure there. Hey, there was one other question that happened right as we started that video. And I know the answer to this, and I'm sure most people aren't going to be as thrilled with their connections as you are with your connection. But did you have to upgrade the internet connection to your house? If so, what speed are you getting to feed the AT&T circuit?
So I always say that, you know, the best mistakes happen on, or the best engineering happens on accident. When I moved to LA for this job, I chose a place downtown because I just always lived in downtown when I lived in DC, when I lived in Boston, and when I lived in Oklahoma City. And I just chose downtown LA. The internet provider in my building actually usually provides internet to the skyscrapers in downtown LA. And then they started realizing they had another audience in residential. So I have dark fiber between my building and LA1. So I have 0 millisecond ping time to my provider, and I have 1 gig up and down. And that's what I've always had. So the connection in place here was actually already fairly robust. And then when I started putting all the traffic on it, I think I looked and I do about 15 gig of traffic a day for a broadcast.
Wow, that's amazing. Remember when a 1.5 meg T1 was considered a corporate size internet connection?
Yeah, and it was like 20 grand a month to have that.
Right. So there you go, everybody. Move downtown. No, you know, a lot of places in the country have fiber like that. You know, bi-directional fiber. We don't have it in a lot of places in LA, but good for you for having that.
And ultimately,
I'm sure we're all jealous.
It's gear I had in place. I had all the Unify. I had the Unify Dream Machine Pro. And it is amazing to where in I call it my frame room, it's my closet. And I have a switch in there and the internet comes into that. And then I have a VLAN that is the public internet. So any of my switches in my apartment, the ones that are in the rack here, have that VLAN, put it on that VLAN. And then I have 10 static IPs from my provider and I can put it easily on that VLAN.
Wow. I'm not even going to tell everybody the price you pay, but it's a lot less than my Spectrum.
It's under $100.
Okay, so now that everyone's depressed at home, we have some more challenges. On the engineering side, clearly we're just seeing Rob in his control room, but what remote engineering support challenges did you face? And what size was your team?
So I have a team of 3 right now, including me. The biggest challenge, you know, the little simple things that always like flummox us, like the first engineering fix is, oh, did you try rebooting it or turning it off and turning it back on? And so how do you do that when the office is 25 miles away? Well, I found a little, doing some Googling, I found a little power strip that's 8 outlets, and every individual outlet is a different control surface in a web page. So you set it for a public IP, and then that power strip is now a web server, and you can log in securely and change the power status of each of those outlets to be able to reboot. So all of my equipment, like my encoders, my decoders at the office, even the multi-viewer, and now a backup web encoder is all in one of those outlets. So if there's a problem, power cycle it remotely and you can get back into it.
That's awesome. We used to say NAB maybe wasn't the kind of place you went to see the big products because we already know who they are, but you go and you find those little needles and haystacks. You can do that on the internet now.
Yeah, that's one of the great things that you have to like backwards in what's the problem and then backwards into the solution. And the internet's really great about helping that.
Yeah, fantastic. So you were also saying that your editors were already using Bebop? And so how many editors do you have and what are they working on?
So the editing team, we transitioned at the first of the year. We'd been working with Bebop since about this time last year to figure out what the workflow would be. We saw them at NAB a couple of years ago, and then Mike Ricosa was instrumental about figuring out what the structure of our setup and our workflow would look like with getting Sony to integrate C. So we're using C as our asset manager, and as a workflow management tool, that is unbelievable. It takes so much. I know everybody's using Dropbox right now. I always call Sony C, and I don't know if they like me calling this, but I call it Dropbox on crack. And then you can put your assets there and then put it in a media box. I can send that media box to the producers to check it. I can send it to a client to be able to see it. If a asset happens later in the show, like a sponsor segment, I can clip that out from C and send it. But with the editors, they can go in on Monday morning and grab all the content from the race weekend and have it downloaded into Bebop. And since they're both sitting on the AWS backbone, it's nearly instantaneous to download. All the assets are right there. It's a shared environment, and then they can put it back in C and send it out in media boxes. It's been really helpful. And it literally was just moving the gear from their house or from their office to the house, and they just kept working.
Amazing. Amazing what you can do. The cloud is still kind of an enigma to some people, but I'm sure in a very short time, it's going to be something that we're all using. We all use Dropbox and Google Drive, et cetera. You're just using this kind of on a pro app level.
Right. And C's been really instrumental in being able to change the way, instead of everything being stored on-prem, C can now be used remotely, and it doesn't matter where you are, because you can get to it as long as you have an internet connection. You can get to it. And a lot of the tools Sony's developing is making it to where you can do some rough cut editing and deliverables directly from the cloud without ever having to bring the asset locally.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. And let's see, you're also utilizing social, right? So you're doing live shows on Facebook and YouTube. What other social media outlets, and how are you doing that?
So one of the things that we found is the more engaging that we can be with fans, the more they're going to respond to it. So like the Shop Talk show we started doing weekly, being able to engage with fans and ask questions and answer questions in real time is really big. The show like Nhra Rewind is streamed live to all of our platforms, so we can have that interaction again. And again, I think just having something that people can, every Friday tune in for this, every Wednesday tune in for this, it gives them something to go to, because, just now TV networks are catching up to doing programming again, to where it's fresh content that they haven't seen.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. You got vMix, you're using vStream, Singular, some of these other things that I know you have in your Swiss Army knife and your other bag. What other tools are you using?
Yeah, coming into a work from home environment, I didn't have access to things like we use Elemental encoders to stream to our OTT provider. The problem is I can't go to my boss and say, hey, I need $10,000 for another encoder for my house. So doing some Googling and asking some of the other industry professionals, vMix seemed to be the right choice. Not only is it a good software-based switcher, but in combination with Singular graphics, I can present an end user experience that looks just like it came out of a TV truck through using a $350 product. Right.
Amazing. Okay, great. So now live events are coming back, right? So how are you used basically as live events resumed, as far as remote support and all that?
So when we figured out that we were going to be able to go, we own a track in Indianapolis. And when we figured out that we would be able to do live racing again, we started discussing, and because the nature of COVID, we have to do more distancing in the TV truck. So, we've all been in a tape room in a TV truck, and there's 15,000 people in the space of like 5 feet. So we had to figure out, how can we move some of those roles outside of the TV truck and still get the same deliverable to the end user? Well, now that I had all this connectivity to the truck, we started discussing the idea of me being able to edit here using a comm system that lets me talk to the TV truck directly, and then using one of the computers to roll on the feed from the TV truck and edit segments live and then feedback. So essentially they said, well, let's figure out what the best use of that is. And the idea of doing bumps in and out of break seem to be the best use of that, and to up the broadcast experience deliverable. And it turned out really great. In fact, I can share my screen and show you one of those.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So this is a template I built that lets me use the headshots of the drivers that we shot on Media Day back in February. And then I just have a project that has all the drivers standing in, built out by class. And so when the round of racing's over, I get on the headset and talk to the producer and say, hey, I'm thinking, how about the Justin Ashley and Leah Pruitt run for the next break? And he says, that sounds great. So then I put this together. And then render it out, call the TV truck on the headset, say, hey, I'm ready to feed you this package. And they say, okay, taking it. And then it's in the EVS and they play it out. And then we have a Google Doc that we use and puts it in as an element. And then the producer in the front of the truck sees it. So it's very seamless, deliverable. And it's just like I would be sitting in the TV truck.
You know, one of the things that we can't minimize here is comm systems. You know, we talked about, in fact, at the ASC and other organizations that we're in on the film side, we're still using walkie-talkies or have been using walkie-talkies. Obviously, on the sports side, live event side, you've been using, more two-way, constant open comm systems. There's some new systems out there, right? Software-based systems that you have used to integrate into your more traditional systems for you, that without these tools, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing, right?
Right. And again, it was stuff that, I can't give enough praise to Mike Ricosa for figuring this stuff out before pandemic. It solved a problem he was having, that all of his fiber techs that helped keep the show running during the live events, he couldn't give them all RTS panels to carry around with him to talk. So he found Unity, which runs on your phone and then connects via Wi-Fi, Ethernet, whatever you want, through Unity to the Dante network, which then talks to the RTS network. And you would never know that I'm not on a RTS panel just talking right here. So the same thing, I have a iPad that I run the program on. And when I'm ready to feed the truck, I say, hey, Carrie, it's Rob. I need to feed you something. And it's just like right in his ears.
That's awesome. Especially important during COVID right now, where you really can't get close to somebody. That makes a lot of sense. That's fantastic. Great. Another great find. Now you have a couple more segments, right? We saw the ins and outs. You also did an interview type show produced for Fox and Premiere.
Right. So one of the things that we discovered, that having the setup here to be able to do drivers and interviews on Skype, is now we can get drivers, instead of saying, hey, I need you at 3 p.m. for a live hit during the TV show, we can now pre-produce segments here. And because of the TriCaster and on the air video, I can now produce a segment from here, and I loaded all of the Fox graphics into the TriCaster. And so it looks just like the TV truck produced it. So anyone who knows NHRA drag racing knows who John Force is. I always joke and say John Force will be played by Gary Busey in a film. So he has set this season out because of COVID, and he wanted to participate in the U.S. Nationals. So they set up an interview to where our main announcer in Boston and John Force at his shop in Yorba Linda called into my facility here in downtown LA. And then we did an interview on Skype, and it was our entire segment in the Fox TV show. So here, I'll share the screen again and show you that.
Lucas Oil Raceway, Indianapolis, and the U.S. Nationals are drag racing's great gathering place for familiar faces, but perhaps drag racing's most familiar face isn't here this weekend. John Force Racing has decided to forego the rest of the 2020 season. We decided to catch up and check in with John Force himself, the king of Nitro Funny Car Racing, to see how he's doing, and we chalked to him at his shop in California.
John, it's great to see you. It's great to talk to you, and certainly great to see you doing well.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great for you, but this is painful for me. Going into to Indy, this is painful.
Well, John, your 29
So there you can see John. So Brian on the left is in his house in Boston. John is in his shop in Yorba Linda. And then they're both calling in on Skype. And then because of TriCaster having that great 4-layer setup, I can set it up to make it look just the way it does in the TV truck. And then we produce this segment. They B-rolled it in the TV truck, and it was our entire segment 9 during our Fox show.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. You also have another one that you did where you're actually using Skype and Zoom. You solved another issue where you didn't have enough inputs.
Yeah, so the Mickey Thompson is another sponsor for NHRA, and they do the Pro Bike Battle every year. And what they usually do is they have all the drivers come to a stage, and then there's each one of the awesome tires that Mickey Thompson makes, and the driver finds their spot, essentially their like qualifying number, by going and flipping over a tire. So to change that up a little bit, they sent our announcer in Boston a bunch of envelopes with numbers in it, and then each of the riders chose, a tire based on what, and that gave them what their number was. But we had 8 people that need to join, and the New Tech Talk Show only does 4. So I, using NDI, grabbed everyone came in on a Zoom, and then using NDI's virtual input and NDI's scan converter, I took the video of everyone on Zoom, sent that in as a source to the TriCaster, and then the return video of Brian talking to them and the audio came back to them as an input. So on their Zoom chat, it looks just like they're talking to Brian on Zoom, but then I'm able to use it as a layer in the show. So I essentially turned it into a game show, and we did it. I'll show you a little of this.
Something with a big tire in the back, has that cool flame tread pattern, and it has the skinny front runners they offer as well if you want to get that big and little tile look. So this is the deal. Those are your 8.
Here, we'll hop over here to where the sound effects are better.
Baja ATZ right there. Oh, baby, here we go. We got a matchup.
Oh, got Jerry.
There it is.
Round.
So Andrew Hines and Sherry. First round. I like it.
But
That
Jerry
moves us
doesn't
to
pick
our
up
show.
my turn. Okay.
Yep.
My brother had the Baja MTZ on his truck, and I love them. So, and I love my brother. So hopefully he'll be my good luck charm. I'm going with Baja MTZ.
All right, this is like an emotional pick right here. I like it.
Come on. Not one. No one, not one, not one, not one, not one.
Oh.
So it was fun. Like, we made it a fun game.
That's awesome. And that's something I think that we're all finding very refreshing right now is that, yes, it's great to see people in the studio and with slick presentations, but we get to see people at home, natural. You're basically seeing them as their family sees them. It's not overly produced. That's fantastic. Actually, we're going to go into the gear in a second, but before that, we're going to stop for another quick Q&A. Brian, do you want to come on at all and read any questions we might have?
Thanks. So, Rob, you described so many great examples there, but I was wondering, in my past experience with broadcasters, you were always arguing, or I had to always argue with art department people and all these people that had a say on the look and feel. But you just described all these quick things on the fly that you're producing yourself. How much approval and sort of pre-advanced setup is done with all these assets and all these elements so that you can just on the fly assemble these things in these timelines and bring them to air?
Well, again, I hate to say like one of the good things about COVID, but one of the things that's been nice is that everything's moving so quickly that it's kind of like, I know I'm intimately involved so much with the art department as it is. So I know kind of like what brand looks like, that if I get it close to brand, they're pretty good about approving it and making it look, just saying, hey, that's close enough, go ahead and do it. But one of the things that's nice about Bebop is we install the fonts once and everybody has access to it. So they know like, oh, Go Bold is the primary font. This is the treatment on top of it to make it look like this campaign. So it's all there. And as long as everybody's already thinking in brand, it's easy to kind of shape anything into brand. But I have the nice thing about Monday is I make my product, I put it in Monday. The approver is set there for the executive producer for our show, Steve Reinches. He gets an email. He goes in. The media box is there. So if he's on his phone or if he's on his laptop, he gets the media box. He can watch it, and then he marks it approved. It moves it to a workflow, and then it sends a note for distribution out of that.
Thanks for that response. A lot of people sort of kind of, threw their hands up when you said you had the zero latency sitting on top of one Wilshire, kind of called BS on that. So let us rephrase that question. Before everyone has to move to Koreatown, what would be the cutoff? What would be the limitation where you could do what you just described and did, but let's say you didn't have that sort of sitting right on top of one Wilshire benefit?
Here, we'll do this just to...
Proof is in the pudding, Rob. We need some music for this. Jeopardy music.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire music or something?
Yeah.
Some intense light cue music.
Yeah.
So yes, I do get the benefit of being that close to LA1, but I think it's just finding the right, maybe SRT causes too much error correction for you. So maybe you do an RTSP pull. So I think it's just figuring out like what gives you the best deliverable to your environment. And then also talking to your internet provider. I mean, a lot of those internet providers have business options that move you out of whatever connection you're in for the public internet to the less public internet, and they can give you a different routing scheme.
Another question that came up was, you put together a fairly efficient workflow with sort of non-disparate, traditional products that, wouldn't, be laid out, say, by Grass Valley or Sony for your traditional broadcast control room. However, now that you have it working, would you go back? Do you feel benefits to what you've designed? Is there engineering limitations, or do you feel like, hey, I'm on the right track, this is the right way to go, and anybody could build this? And talk us more about where you feel your stopgap designs are, and is this your future, or is this just a stopgap, as I said?
So a lot of this was already really in place the way it was. It was just the ancillary support that we provide to the TV show was already using most of this gear. It was just the nature of, it was in our studio at our office in Glendora, and I would walk out of my office to go in there and do support. So it was pretty easy to move a lot of this home. And I still use a lot of Grass Valley gear that sits, so I get a feed. We're doing our main broadcast in Dolby Atmos. So transmission comes to me in 16 channel. Well, my SRT encoder is 2 channel. So I have Grass Valley's XVP 3901. I hope I got that right. Robert Erickson will be mad at me if I didn't. The 3901 takes the 16 channels and then does a mix down so that I can then use that feed at home. And then when I send it back, it re-up-reses it to deliver it back to the TV truck.
Okay, to sort of add to that question, what's the scalability? How many editor teams are working at the same time with the same media on your servers? And let's say, this event were to, be a little larger, what's the scalability of your setup?
Well, being on Bebop, I mean, I don't want to speak for Bebop, but I think that they can go almost unlimited users. And then it's just a matter of how much storage you subscribe to through them. We've had up to 12 people editing at once with no issues. And the beauty of the way we have our media structured is that it's all done by project. So you go into the media drive and you see like, oh, I'm making something for Gainesville next weekend. And then all the media for the Gainesville is in the same shared spot. So the editors know we can all dip from that pool. And then when we make our deliverables, it's in the same spot. So it's infinitely scalable. I think it's all about managing workflow so that the editors know where to go, so you don't have a bunch of silos running at once.
Bebop concurred on that response. Okay.
There's Michael. Yeah. Hi, Michael.
Yeah. That's very cool. That's very cool. Any other questions, Brian, at this point? We'll have some more question time later on as well.
No, let's, if there's more to talk about, let's jump back into the presentation.
Cool. So awesome. I know we like to talk tech, but you showed us a lot of great actual projects and pieces that you edited together. Real quick, just to prove that shot you sent earlier was not a canned shot, can you show us your over-the-shoulder cam in your control center and just talk a little bit about how long it took to set up and what all the gear is?
So this is like version 5. When we first moved everything home, it was all sitting on like a counter just to get it up and running. And we got our first show done about 3 days after I moved everything home. But you can see so this is a playback server over here. This is the TriCaster and then the control interface for that. This is the output of the New Tech Talk Show. So each one of these is the Skype channels. So when someone calls in, I can then create a custom return and audio back to them. This is what's going out to return right now. This is my Grass Valley Kaleido that lets me do audio QC. This is a multi-viewer just so I can see the feeds. And then this is the rack of the gear that supports all this. And then a mixer, my iPad that controls my decks, and then my Kindle that's my interface to Unity for RTS. And then my primary edit system here. And then, of course, every editor needs 2 beverages.
and you could build that exactly the way you wanted to. So you said the initial build took about how many days? 5 days?
The initial build to get a show on the air was about 5 days.
And then you've been massaging it ever since because you can.
Right. And then, when you're working in a space, as all engineers do, we say, it'd be better is if that panel were up there. Oh, it'd be better if I had a waveform monitor there. Oh, it'd be better if I had a machine to access my Google Doc that has all my edits here. So you just kind of constantly adjusting.
That's great. Yeah. And Michael again for Bebop says man cave to beat all man caves. That's absolutely right.
Until you have to run the air conditioner at 40 degrees in the rest of the house to keep it comfortable in here.
Exactly. And your setup, by the way, is not just to be used for production. You actually have to accommodate post-production with that as well.
Right. So one of the things, after a weekend of racing, we have a bunch of content, again, that goes into C. From the TV truck, there's a NAS that sits in the TV truck. After the files are made through X file in the EVS, they're dumped onto the NAS, and then C's uploader watches those folders, pushes it up to C, and then usually Sunday night, I come in and download all the files here or into Bebop, create a 30-minute show that goes back to Fox Monday for captioning. So it's less than a 12-hour turnaround. And then we do a show for Lucas Oil, which is all of our sportsman class. We do a pro mod show. And one of the cool things that we found during this workflow is our TV director, Chris, actually edits the raw segments without dialogue. He sends them to me through on-the-air video. I play it out. The 2 announcers call in on a Comrex Opal, which is like the new internet ISDN. They're getting programmed through Skype. And then they have a nice microphone just plugged into a web browser. And we voice the whole show remotely. And then an hour after we're done voicing, I sit here, put it back together, do the 5.1 mix, QC it through Grass Valley's Kaleido to make sure that we're meeting LKFS standards for Fox, and then send it up to C, and it's delivered to Vitek for captioning.
It's amazing how far prosumer and some consumer gear has gotten. The quality is at the point where, back in the old days, the audio recorders, unless they were pro, were just not good enough. And now anyone can do anything with consumer gear, right, quality-wise. Blackmagic cinema cameras, et cetera. The new 12K cameras out now, et cetera. Now you also are working with Bebop and their beta program, correct?
Yeah, so one of the cool things that the Bebop guys have shown some of the beta products, and they have some great stuff coming, including like SDI monitoring. So from your cloud environment, being able to see SDI back in your workspace, and including multi-channel audio. So they have a lot of really great stuff coming up, and it's exciting to see how they're really using the pandemic as a chance to push their evolution forward faster.
Yeah, and again, I know you mentioned it before, but not to trivialize apps like Zoom and Skype and even Slack. I mean, some of these are not very heralded high-end apps, but they really function as kind of the hub and control center of almost everything we do.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things too we're finding is the ability, when you have an idea in a broadcast environment or in a post-production facility, when you're sitting there and you're working on a project and you say, man, I really wish I could find this. Well, you get up, you go get a coffee and you go talk to an editor so you can like collaborate in person. It's so hard to do that now when that person's 30 miles or even across the country. So the ability for Slack to just have a chat open, or Microsoft Teams or Zoom to just have a chat open that you can just throw an idea in, and then someone can say, oh, let's see what's going on in here, and take 2 minutes to respond. And you kind of have that like virtual collaboration. I mean, obviously it's not the same as in person, but it's what we've got right now. And so just making the best of it helps.
Right, exactly. Okay, very cool. And as far as the communications, again, you're using Unity to Dante, using an iPad. So again, you've got lots of different ways to communicate, not just on those devices, but hooking into your RTS system. Were there any issues with that? Does you ever get to the point where there's too many speakers and it gets too crowded? How does that work as far as channel assignments?
So that's one of the things that's a little frustrating, but it's like, we're in an environment where we have to adapt. So Unity's a little, it's like the old party line. So we're so used to on RTS being able to have individual thumb wheels to talk to each person. So Unity's a little more party line. So you have to kind of like, I'll text the producer during the show and be like, hey, can you turn your mic on so I can hear you so I know where we are? Or, hey, can you turn your mic off? I'm trying to feed something to tape and you're talking too much. So
right.
So it's little things like that. But those are the little problems to fix. The fact that it's happening at all is great.
Yeah. Very cool. Oh, we haven't talked about QC, have we?
A little bit. So one of the things I always like to plug this box because I think this is one of the unsung heroes. You can see that they've had it for a while before Grass bought them. This little box takes SDI in and then spits out HDMI. So with this, you can now do LKFS monitoring on your product. Whereas, I know it's built into Premiere and stuff, but I like to have it on a monitor so I can see it.
Right.
And so I can just sit here and like adjust the audio and watch it. This box is really great. We own about 5 of these. And it's perfect for QCing remotely. And again, it runs on an HDMI monitor. So I have a TV I bought on like Amazon Prime Day for $150, and that's my output for this.
Production and post on a budget by Rob Hendrick.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the Grass Valley Kaleido, not the Kaleidoscope, which was a 50 power killer. I often joke it's not actually a joke; it's serious. But when I worked at a facility years ago, when the editor said that the client wanted 2 channels of Kaleidoscope, he would tell his edit assist to go turn off all the coffee pots in his bay because it would trip the breaker.
And you don't have to run. And with that, you don't have to run the heater.
That's right. Exactly. Cool. So let's see if there's anything else. Rob, let me know if I missed anything before we go into the closing, things you've learned.
We want to show the gear slide?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's show the gear slide.
Forgive me for my PowerPoint again.
No worries.
So this is kind of the office side of everything. The AT&T video systems right there. And then there's the Grass Valley Denzite that has all the cards in it. And then I actually just added a HyperDeck Studio there that I can control remotely. So I can actually roll on the full 8-channel audio coming back from the TV truck and then feed it back to myself if I miss something. And then here's kind of all the gear that's used in this setup. Again, the KiloView encoders and decoders, Grass Valley's products, NewTek, Comrex Opal. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but I found that at NAB a few years ago. That box is amazing. It sits on my network on an outside IP address, and you send a link to the person you want to come in and chat. And as long as they have a really high-end sound card and a good microphone, I usually send the little Shure USB to XLR adapters. They plug that into their microphone, and then I get full broadcast audio out, 2 channels, XLR from here, and the audio is unbelievable. And in fact, I joke sometimes it sounds better than what we produce on site.
By the way, real quick, just to let everyone know, instead of frantically writing down a lot of this stuff, because there's a lot of information, at the end, we're going to share a link that Rob has provided that has some of this information.
And then the other products here, we got Sony, Bebop, AT&T Global Video, On the Air, NewTek, Singular, their cloud-based graphics. It's a couple guys that used to work for Viz, and they went off and did this, and their customer support's amazing, and the graphics output remotely is great. One of the good things too is it's completely cloud-based, so as long as I have the inputs set up here, I can have a producer in anywhere running graphics for me, and it comes on and off as needed. That's through vMix. And then of course, Skype TX is the product that NewTek did with Skype to allow you to do the mix minus and everything. And then Adobe and Avid. Anything we do for the big TV show, we're in Atmos, so I've got to use Avid and Pro Tools for that.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for that. So you've obviously accomplished a lot with what you had. What have you learned? You know, what are some of the things that you've learned in this? And then also we want to talk about what challenges are still left to be solved.
Still fighting, you know, having great internet at home is only as good as the internet that you're connecting to somewhere else. So I find a lot of times downloading large files, never have a problem with coming from C, but there's problems like to our office right now, the internet provider there, that's the public internet provider, has some latency problems. So we fight that a little bit. So, you know, some days SRT won't work, so I have to switch to RTSP to be able to get a successful stream from the office. I can't say communications enough. Communications, because the more in the loop everyone is, I mean, there's probably 36 text chats going right now to be able to, for each project to be able to say, oh, what are you doing in this? What are you doing in this? One of the things I didn't mention here, Monday is our kind of workflow provider, and Monday's doing a great job of keeping everything separated to where at a glance you can go log in and see what's this person working on, how many outputs have they had, and then watch the media and say, oh, that'll work for this project, so that we're not duplicating efforts.
Yeah, I could see project management being key. Obviously, there's a lot of multitasking going on. So yeah, that's a great challenge. We're just around 12:52. I think we're gonna start opening up for our final set of Q&A. Brian, what do you got there?
So right now, we have no questions in the queue, but I think with you guys wrapping up, let's ask the audience if they have anything they'd like to ask Rob specifically to either, you know, the installation, the application, his customers, how we, you know, thought through some of these issues. Feel free to speak up.
And while you do that, I just wanted to let you know that Rob was kind enough to create a little website for us. So if you go to Hendrick.tv, so that's HEDRICK.TV/WFH, work from home.
Yeah, I figured that's easier than, like you said, someone going, okay, what's that, or trying to screenshot it when it happens.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of someone who's taken a lot of off-the-shelf tools that have had maybe limited usage in a professional sense and really glued them all together for a really great, you know, modular approach to problem solving. Yeah,
and it's been very effective. In fact, we keep saying, you know, when we get back to normal, that there's things that we want to adjust in the workflow, but the ability to be able to create remotely increases the product overall.
Absolutely. Cool. And someone said, can you put that on the chat? All panelists and attendees, I have the power. So I just put that up on the chat. Hopefully everybody sees that. Thank you, John, for mentioning that. Looks like there are a bunch of questions now, Brian.
Yeah, so let's start with Brian Bailey asked, did you find that any of your equipment was a bottleneck to your product quality? Was there any sort of weakest link in the chain?
No, we already were editing in 1080. So everything that we are doing now is still 1080, and it's been a smooth transition. There's been no hiccups with quality problems.
Mark Jolis asked, now let's assume we get back to a normal here in the future. Are you going to maintain this home studio, or are you going to collapse that down? Is this a permanent thing now? What's the family say?
What would I like, or what would
ideally, you should
ideally, I think it would
some
be
awards behind you to give you credit.
I think it would be like there's a good blend between working in the office and working from home. I think there'd be some hybrid between the two.
Okay, well, we'll see what the producers say and how that goes forward. But Jonathan asked, so as you put these projects together, how do you create Avid and Adobe friendly file formats to edit into the incoming system, and what codec types are you working in? What works best for you in your projects?
So the real-time edits I'm capturing in ProRes. That's the easiest I've found, and something that's easy to move across the network in real time that doesn't take 1,000 hours. So I'm doing ProRes on the AJA IOXT with the Mac Pro Tower. And then the primary show from the EVS creates everything in ProRes as well. They do ProRes HQ, and then they upload to C. So anything that's edited for air after the show is done off the raw files out of the EVS.
Cool. And thank you, Apple and Ari, for really professionalizing that ProRes codec.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else there, Brian?
No, if you could maybe mention our sponsors that were involved today, that would be great.
Absolutely, yeah. So we do have some closing announcements. I just want to thank you, everyone, for attending our first SMPTE Presents Ask an Innovator. Actually, Chris, I don't know if you've got the slides, but next week we've got Kylie and Brooke Noska in our Ask a Hollywood Expert series. Brooke and her team won an HPA award last year for Best Visual Effects for a 1-hour television series. So it'll be great to have her up next week. We also have the SMPTE Fall Conference, Game On 2020, an immersive remote experience, and that is November 10th through the 12th. And yes, once again, we'd really like to thank all of our sponsors for this event. And we've got, I believe, one more, or maybe there's multiple slides, but thank you for attending SMPTE Hollywood Presents Ask a Hollywood Innovator. So great that you could make it, and have a good day.
I also want to thank Chris Alvarez for his background coordination and pulling this together. And thanks again, Rob, for joining us today and kicking off our Industry Innovator event. And thank you, Greg, for sponsoring and hosting this, or at least hosting.
Very welcome.
I'll send you the sponsorship check. All righty. Thanks, everyone.
All right, everybody. Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks for attending.
Bye now.